Hello, and thank you for tuning in to our weekly blockchain gaming news roundup. It is Friday, the 23rd of August. I am your host, Jenny Jordan, and with me is co-host John Jordan. Hi, John.
Hello, how are you?
I'm good. Good. How are you?
Yeah, not bad.
Good. It's been a little bit quiet this week, seeing as loads of companies and developers are out at Gamescom in Germany. But there has been some news. So Ton Foundation announced recently that they had introduced Ton Ventures, a 40 million fund going towards projects building on the Ton blockchain. One of the first projects to receive funding from this fund has been the mobile gaming platform Gamee, and particularly its What protocol or What Bird protocol, including a game, What Bird Racer, but mainly the What token and kind of a big ecosystem that they are distributing via Telegram. And they announced this week that they raised funding from Ton Ventures, and then at the back of that, they also raised some funding from Pantera Capital. So it's all going well for them. And by no coincidence, we also have our Mavens this week, which have discussed this sort of subject of the growth of games on Ton and Telegram, and sort of looked at the more long-term sustainability of the current growth rate that those games are seeing, and whether sort of it's a protocol for sustainability. Like a very varied kind of set of opinions. Some more sober than others, maybe. You know, so do check that out on blockchaingaming.biz. We have seen news from Dimensionals that they're pivoting. Well, not pivoting. They are completely becoming a Web2 game from having branded themselves very strongly as a Web3 project. They were enthusiastic about the prospect of NFTs in the game, but clearly things have gone wrong there. Do you want to talk us through, John, a little bit what's gone on there and the reaction from the industry as well?
Yeah. I mean, it's not a project that I've sort of been at arm's length on it a little bit. But it was they were a company called Mino Games, US developer, and they had done some successful games in the past. I wouldn't say like sort of massively successful games, but they weren't like a startup who hadn't done anything. They'd done a couple of sort of you could say well regarded, I suppose, sort of Web2 projects. And I guess they weren't in the sort of the first wave of sort of everyone announcing blockchain stuff in 2021, 22. But maybe 2022 they sort of got together. But they sort of came a little bit later than that wave, at least in terms of their public announcements and stuff. And it was, as far as I understand, it's sort of a bit of a sort of Pokemon type game. So a lot of these sort of creature collection, sort of battling sort of thing. So very much focused on these sort of sort of Pokemon type characters that you're collecting. And the main guy, Sasha McKinnon, at the same time sort of announced this project, was also launched this thing called Free NFT. I think it's freenft.com. That was back when sort of NFTs were sort of still a big thing. There was lots of interest in how you used NFTs to basically give yourself free marketing. And that was how sort of Free NFT as a project, as sort of a platform came along. And the whole point was people would sign up and they would get access to free NFTs. And it wasn't like you were launching 10,000 NFTs that were free. It was sort of like, you'd launch these free NFTs and maybe you'd have millions of them, but you'd sort of be engaging people. And that sort of platform, portal maybe, would be how you would sort of engage these sort of people. So the two things were sort of separate, but also sort of combined. And then actually Gabe Leiden and Mythic, his company Limit Break, then bought out this sort of free NFT platform. I don't think for a lot of money, but they all got sort of quite excited about it, and it sort of fed into some of the stuff with Digidaigaku, which is Limit Break's sort of ongoing game. But according to sort of Sasha McKinnon, it's one of the big issues that sort of derailed them was at the time they did their free NFT mint, and people started buying them because NFTs weren't dead then at that point, and they were getting a bit of revenue from that in terms of the trading volume. I think, I don't know, whatever it was, 5% was what a lot of people had. So every time an NFT got traded, the original developer got 5%. But that was at the time when the Blur marketplace launched, and the Blur marketplace was the first one not to enforce royalties. So basically, you had lots of trading going on there, other reasons for why people were trading there, but basically it didn't enforce royalties. So suddenly all these NFTs were getting traded much more liquidly, but developers or the IP holders weren't getting any money. And so he sort of said that was a big deal for them because they had sort of expected to sort of generate some ongoing revenue from these NFTs they'd given away for free, and also this at the same time as sort of NFTs sort of came out of the public consciousness, this free NFT platform didn't really work out for them because they lost the revenue stream, and they also lost this sort of marketing channel that they'd hoped to sort of engage with and create a large audience for their game. So the sort of counters to that are they'd raised $15 million in VC funding. So that's not a super enormous amount, but equally it's not nothing. I mean, that should be enough to get you to where you need to be without relying on NFT trading volumes, which everyone knew was sort of up and down. You couldn't necessarily rely on those. So I don't know. I mean, with all these sort of things, it's he said, she said. So he put out this long thing on Twitter about these being sort of key aspects of them sort of rethinking. I think the other side has been that their communications was very bad. So I think quite early on in 2023 they sort of decided this wasn't really working out for them, and what could they do about it? And I think obviously one of the options there was just go Web 2. So I think they sort of were thinking about that much earlier, and they weren't necessarily communicating that to their audience. And then they basically stopped communicating on their main Discord and basically set up another Discord for just promoting this game as a Web 2 game. And they put out a Steam version, which actually lots of blockchain games do put out a Web 2 version on Steam because Steam doesn't really allow NFTs. So that doesn't necessarily mean you're pivoting when you put out a Steam version. They did put that out in March this year. But there's still a lot of uncertainty in the Web3 community about, what was going on with the project. Was it ongoing? And obviously the NFT prices had all collapsed. So, as ever, there's always a vocal sort of group of people who are always annoyed they've lost loads of money. And, obviously Sasha pointed out this is a free mint. So if you're spending $100,000, if you're spending a few $1,000s buying something, we gave it away for free. So, we didn't sell it for $10,000. But so generally, I think obviously if you're running a company, you get loads of stress, you get loads of people shouting at you, the numbers are going down, it doesn't look good, you're running out of money perhaps, and they took the decision that they sort of took, and that was like, didn't decide to shut down, which obviously is something they could have done. They could have just said it's not working, shut down, give all the money back to investors and move on. They decided, no, we think we've got a good game, we're going to just leave these Web3 people behind. And of course, the Web3 people are all sort of annoyed that some people are saying they were cowards, some people called it a slow rug. I don't think, from my outside viewpoint, there was anything malicious. They weren't ripping people off. It was just obviously when you're running a business, you have to be quite hard nosed about it. And but equally, you don't want to immediately tell people we're thinking about going Web 2. So how you time that? And Sasha McKinnon said, he got all that wrong. He, the communication side of it was really not handled at all well. But I guess the sort of the thing in the tail was when they launched this Web 2 version and they started working with streamers and all the usual influencers that you do when you're doing this sort of game. He said the streamers sort of quite liked it, but then people watching the streams would go, well, "This is a blockchain game. We hate blockchain. This is these NFT awful things." So he said they not only did they sort of Web3 wasn't a big enough big enough for them to launch, and it didn't work out the way they thought. When they came to Web 2, because it'd been a Web3 game, the Web 2 people rejected them and said you're a horrible NFT game, and you got review bombed, and no streamers would work with them and all this sort of stuff. So he was just like, he made maybe. I mean, I kind of think at that point you sort of go, oh, let's go back to Web 3. Maybe at that point you've made too many sort of flip flops. Presumably the NFTs are still live somewhere. I mean, you can't kill the NFTs. So I don't know. That would be my sort of, either they're going to have to struggle through as a Web 2 game, which is probably all these things. He's obviously making his own argument and steel manning it, and who knows? I have no reason not to trust him. But it would be it would be in a sense sort of funny to reboot it as a Web3 game. But yeah, that caused lots of it's one of those things where everyone sort of has an opinion, and no one really knows the truth is quite granulated in terms of shades of grey. I suppose.
Obviously, like responsibility is a big sort of theme in Web3. Who's responsible for what, developers, and then pleasing your community, which you say kind of maybe have been given NFTs for free, but they see themselves almost like shareholders, and with but how can developers sort of how can it be set up from scratch to avoid these sorts of issues, do you think?
No, I mean, I think, as I say, you have the one sort of nuclear option, which is basically you get to the point and you go, we just can't, we can't really see a way through. It's going to take years, and we can't really do more funding. And so before we get to that point, we'll shut it down and give money back to the investors, and we'll basically say to the community, it didn't work out. We're not working on this anymore. You guys, maybe if you want to continue on with it, we'll give it a open source. But and we've seen people equally sort of pay people back. If you bought the NFT at a certain price, they'll pay it back. In this case, they were free NFTs, so there's nothing to sort of, you can't really refund everyone who's lost money. But they could have done that. And I think we are in this sort of situation where a lot of blockchain games are probably in a sort of quite parlous state at the moment, and they're sort of maybe they are zombie projects that are, they know they can never fulfill what they've sort of promised. Obviously, there's 1,000 blockchain games out there, many more, but there are 1,000 that we've sort of tracked. And clearly, most of those are going to end in failure to some degree. So the fact you've got assets on a blockchain that are always going to be there as long as the blockchain's there, doesn't mean that you have a project. But one of the funny things about blockchain games is they can always we've got a new collaboration with this new, I don't know, social farming platform, or we're going to launch our own L3 on and launch a token, or this other token, or there's sort of ways they always keep the momentum going. Whereas maybe that it would be better for more of them to just say no, we've stopped, or. But I do think that the flip between Web 2 and Web 3, Web 3 and Web 2 is quite difficult. I think so they made a difficult. That was a difficult. They created difficulty, I think.
No, sure. It can't be an easy thing to have to go out and tell your followers.
No, but
you're gonna.
Yeah. Well, I just kind of think they must have realised that it wasn't the Web 2 people were not going to just go, oh great, it's just you just know people. I mean, Steam can be very toxic in terms of review bombing for any number of reasons. So it doesn't have to be about blockchain, but so it's quite, and I think you're seeing now, Web 3 games sort of saying, well, we're sort of, our Web3 stuff is very optional. I mean, I was talking to a couple of people only in the last day or so who basically said that, they're doing blockchain games with NFTs and they really believe in it, but really they said we just want people to come in and play the game, and if they don't get involved with the Web3 stuff, then they don't have to. And I guess we see that, as we often talk about, more in mobile games where you can do all the stuff. It's all blockchain, or it's blockchain in the background, but you're using your Google Pay or Apple Pay, and you don't really realise it's NFTs at that level. So,
Okay, now an old developer under a new name, Nexus Interactive, have raised 2 million. It's not actually clear whether this is recent funding or if it's total funding, but they have raised this for a game that used to be called Aradena Champions, and it is now retitled to it used to be called Aradena Battlegrounds. It is now rebranded to Everdawn Champions. This is a UK-based studio. You know a little bit more about them than I do. It's basically a TCG that's been around, and so just tell us a little bit more about the rebrand and the restructure and. They're sort of, they got AI-based UGC plan.
As you say, this is sort of one of these funny ones. After you've been around in the space for a while, you sort of come across a lot of things, and you sort of lose track of them. And then they something else. We got a press release about this new sort of company, and I was like, I recognise that artwork. That was this other game. That's a bit odd. And then we sort of recognised some of the CEO. recognise his name. He had quite a distinctive name, so I had actually spoken to him a couple of years ago. So he sort of managed to push the pieces together. So yeah, so and again, this goes back to a little bit with dimensionals. If you get to the stage where, I mean, in this case, they're staying in Web3. They've always been Web3, but they've sort of totally rebranded the company. It's called Nexus Interactive, I think. Is that right? Nexus Entertainment Interactive. Anyway, so they've totally changed the name of the company, the game. Totally changed the name of the game. They kept the artwork the same, and the NFTs are the same. So that's the only if you knew that beforehand, you sort of know that's the case. They've announced like $2 million a raise of funding. I don't know how much of that is new money and how much was old money. I don't think they formally raised any VC money previously, but they raised some money selling NFTs back when you could sell a couple of $1 million worth of NFTs. So the game itself, I haven't played it, but I have sort of been involved with sort of play tests, watching other people play in this case. So it's quite an interesting game. So it's not really a trading card game. It's like a deck builder where you're sort of strategy game where you're sort of playing. You have characters. You're using cards and they're putting them down on a hex map, and that's moving characters around, and you're sort of fighting over. Not quite capture the flag. I don't quite know what you would call the mode. It's a bit sort of MOBA-esque. So it's quite nice as a game. I'm not quite sure. To me, it seemed like more than a mode for a game rather than a whole complete game. But who am I to say? Apparently, it's been testing on the Elixir the Elixir PC storefront, and it was one of the most played games there last year. So it's going live in September, so it's obviously happening pretty soon. I guess the reason for the whole rebrand and sort of the sort of repositioning of the company and the announcement of funding and all this sort of stuff is because they got a token coming out. So that's often, I think the funding. Yeah, I'm sure. I'm not saying they're lying about the funding, but quite at what period of time that funding has happened, I don't know. But obviously, the big thing that's happening for them is they're launching a token. I mean, obviously, not great timing at the moment, but if you're launching a token, you want to sort of put your best face forward, and launching a token potentially is a way of raising funds.
And launching the game, obviously. So.
Yeah, and the game's going live as well. And I guess sometimes when knowing a little bit about the company, I think people over-egg some of these sort of press releases. So instead of just launching a game now they say we've got this game that's launching, and we've got 2 other games in development, and we're going to be a publisher, and we've got two games that we're going to publish, and there's, as you mentioned, this whole slightly opaque thing about we're doing AI and user generated content, which sort of course, if I was CEO of a company relaunching with a token, I'd obviously talk all my excellent AI stuff, which is probably obviously it means just plugging into open ChatGPT or something, but so there's a little bit of added bells and whistles, which may not, they may have plans to do that sort of stuff, but obviously the thing is the game's coming out, and if the game doesn't do well, then they're a bit stuffed. The really funny thing is they've got this, as everyone does now, they've got this sort of play to earn sort of thing going on, and basically they had this idle game that you could play. If you had NFTs, you could use them in the game. It's actually a bit like Blocklords Dynasty, really. But they had that game running for like a couple of years, and they just rebranded it as a sort of play to earn thing for their token. And it's sort of funny because I've played it 2 years ago and had some sort of forgotten I had some NFTs in there, so I've we'll see if I get any tokens. It'd be kind of amusing, but yeah. At least they're hustling. I suppose they're hustling. They've not given up on Web3. That's the positive bit.
Good. That's a takeaway to focus on. So Saga Blockchain or Saga Origins is one of the companies that are in Germany.
Isn't Saga Origin the publisher?
Yeah, I can't really. Saga Origins, the publisher and the company behind the Saga blockchain. Isn't that not right?
Oh, is it? Okay, good.
I'm not sure. I think so.
Okay.
Anyhow, they're in Cologne, and as part of their Multiverse Summit that they started last year and held for the second time this year, they unveiled 3 new titles coming to their ecosystem. One had actually been unveiled before, Angelic, the game which has been a Solana-based, PC-based sort of dark RPG. So a part of that game, or a separate instance, as they call it, Angelic, the Chaos Theatre, is coming to Saga. In addition to that, there'll be God's Legacy, which we don't know much about, and it's going to be Lusa, the Final Frontier. Is that how you say it, John? Lusa?
No idea.
Anyway, Anyway, it's a space-themed sort of MMO battle royale, cross-platform, looking to come up to consoles as well. So they unveiled some of that during the conference. So more in terms of sort of Saga as a gaming blockchain, it stands out. It's talking about wanting to be cutting edge and wanting to kind of bring in bold titles that no one else sort of touches. That's that sort of edge, what makes them stand out. You've been talking to Rebecca Lau in the past, haven't you, and about kind of the vision of Saga and the company. Do you want to add anything to?
Well, I guess I'm just slightly the it's not the weird thing, but two of those games, as you say, are already on other platforms. So the Angelic's been knocking around for ages on Solana, and then I can't remember, is it the Lucia? Yeah. Anyway, that one's on Polygon and I think Immutable as well. So I'm a little bit one thing with Saga, it's, it is a sort of interconnected sort of blockchain. They call it the L1, where you can launch L1 sort of thing. So it has a strong philosophy of sort of like multi-chain connectability rather than being its own sort of own standalone L1, although it can do that. So I guess it's sort of interesting that of the three games, two of them are working on the blockchains as well. I would say the most intriguing one that they mentioned, but for sort of other reasons, is this God's Legacy game, which I've sort of spent quite a lot of time looking at actually yesterday, and it seems proper bonkers. I'm not sure in a good or bad way. So it's a Polish developer. I'm not.
Rebecca, I would probably say that's a good thing. So
yeah, and it's if you go to, we've got a YouTube video. It's quite hard to find because the developer's called Gameverse, I think. But a lot of the stuff is on some guy's own sort of website. So obviously it's a bit of a passion project for him. And part of it is this sort of actually quite dark sort of fantasy, Nordic sort of pagan sort of stuff with weird talking fauns and witches and not quite horror, but not quite, sort of not for kiddies. And then it sort of has a bit where it's sort of like present day, and it all sort of obviously is intertwined. But there's this sort of current sort of explorer type sort of thing going on there, and there was an odd sort of thing with the sort of Russian helicopter or something with X on the side, like it was invading Ukraine, which it was a bit odd. And then there's this whole sci-fi stuff, which is all in the future. So obviously the guy behind it, and there is like a 40-minute video of this whole thing, like almost like a feature film. So it's obviously the sort of lore and other stuff behind it is really, whether it's coherent or not, I don't know, but he's really thought it through. It's quite intriguing. Not quite sure how that feeds into a game. So I think one of the things is they're obviously a very small team, so it's not, they're using Unreal Engine, but it's not quite of the sort of highest standard that you would expect. Maybe it's not a AAA game because obviously they just sort of funded it themselves. But it's certainly interesting. But quite how it feeds into blockchain but I guess as you say, Rebecca is always quite forthright that Saga is taking risks and allowing creators to show their really creative side. And I think if one game characterizes that, it would be God's Legacy. But yeah, you would have to go and look at the videos and make your own conclusions about.
Well, and maybe it's exactly what the industry needs. I mean, so much has been so much the same, and
no. I mean, it's
not that nothing has worked. I wouldn't say, but obviously a lot hasn't worked out. So it's good to try a different approach and be very sort of, what would you say, very sort of determined and focused on that thing. It's not, not spreading out thin or anything. They know what they're doing.
No, it's not. I mean, as you say, we see lots of sort of art styles that are very sort of generic and sort of similar, and sort of fantasy styles. We sort of know what palette and what sort of design that's going to be. It's very hard to stand out really in terms of sort of art style and aesthetic. And this is as I say, it's sort of it's quite intriguing. I mean, as I say, I think the more complex you sort of make your backlore, then obviously the harder it is to make it coherent. I suppose that's the risk. But I mean that the fact we've spoken about it for 10 minutes, I guess, compared to the other ones, which look very generic and just it's a game. Yeah, whatever.
yeah. let's talk about a developer who definitely knows what they're doing in MetaKing Studios. You spoke to CEO David Johansson this week about the sort of wider vision of Blocklords, and more so how Dynasty plays into that, why Dynasty came about really to start with, what was the idea with that, where they're going with the NFTs, the idea of permadeath and the token, the lot. Please take us into that discussion. It's a brilliant interview. David Johnson is such a grounded, focused developer, really sort of insightful to listen to. So I definitely recommend you go out and listen to the podcast. But yeah, please, John, talk us through a little bit your takeaways from that interview.
Yes. No, it's always really, I think when you get a great interview, then there's obviously more to do with the interviewee. Obviously, I hope I had some ability to shape that conversation. I've played the games a lot. I've spoken to David before, so I guess I was sort of well informed, or very well informed in a way I'm not necessarily always in my podcast. But it was basically David. Basically every answer I think was like a zinger to me. It was just really fascinating. And part of that was, mentioned this new sort of game they put out called Blocklords Dynasty, fully on-chain game on the base blockchain, and he was quite open. He said we had lots of advice, almost pressure from some of our advisors, saying we need to see on-chain activity from Blocklords. Your Lords tokens coming out on exchanges, and we have no activity. He was saying there's about 30,000 people playing the PC game at the moment. That's been live for about a year. It's pretty hardcore, very challenging. You have to throw a lot of time at it. But advisors were just like, you're going to launch a token, and there's no. It's very unclear what's going on. So they made this fully on-chain browser-based game, got up to 150,000 or maybe more daily active users. They were like 40% of all the gas on base at one point. Obviously had loads of bots, so I had a discussion about that because bots is a thing we've been talking about quite a lot. And since Dynasty stopped its airdrop campaign that was driving traffic, its activity dropped 80% down to about 30,000. So it's about the same number of people on the browser-based game, the companion game, really, to the PC game. So it's about the same on each. He's also very good on why they're launching their own chain. So they've got this Lords chain coming out, which is a L3 based on base. And he's saying, well, we do a lot of on-chain stuff when we move the NFTs around, so it's good to have a validation layer. But equally, he said the value of the Lords token will not be generated by in-game action until we have 5, 10, 15 million players. So at the moment they've got 30,000 daily active, so they've got to have some way to go yet to get even to 3 million. That'd be two orders of magnitude. He said that's going to take a few years, so that's where they want to go. But his point is the token is not going to rise in value if we're just relying on 30,000 people and we're giving loads away as rewards, because then they just get sold. It's not just that's the only reason you would launch an L3. From a infrastructure point of view, he thinks that's a good thing and it has value, and they couldn't run their game on base. The game, can't run it on base as is, because gas fees even there are too expensive for the amount of activity they want. So they needed their own L3. Obviously, you can run blockchains without a gas token. Base famously doesn't have a gas token. You use ETH on Base. But anyway, having your own token, he said, it helps for validators. It helps us, keep stuff in the ecosystem. If you give rewards to validators, they tend not to just dump it on the market. They tend to be in it more for the long term than players. And I thought that was quite fascinating, that we all sort of know that. We know that's why people launch nodes and launch their own blockchains, because that's how they can make money. And we also sort of know that at the moment, the amount of people playing blockchain games is just not enough to give tokens any in-game utility, even though everyone talks about, look at all the in-game utility we've designed into our token. It's just, unless you have millions of people playing the game, it just doesn't really matter. But, I thought that was, really quite refreshing that he would just sort of come out and say that. I wasn't like asking him trick questions or anything. So that was great. And then the other thing I really enjoyed was they have this idea of permadeath in the game. So you have these NFTs and you battle them, and if their health goes to zero, then they sort of grey out and they become called fallen heroes. The first time that happened to me, I was a bit sort of shocked because it was one that I'd bought and I spent like $10 on it, and I messed up and it got killed. But then there's this whole thing. They have a mausoleum in the main blockchain game, in the main Blocklords game, and you can basically transfer your dead NFT, your grey NFT, out of Blocklords Dynasty and transfer it to the mausoleum in your main Blocklords game, and you get some extra sort of points from doing that. And he was saying, it'd be a long time in the future, but what we think is your mausoleum will be a sort of will be a sort of a feature, and there may be a game mode that only fallen heroes can play in. There may be like Valhallan sort of mode where you have to play with dead heroes. But the funny thing is, he said, I was sort of like weeping that I'd lost my $10 NFT, and he goes, John, all your heroes are going to die. This is the point of this game. Everything you've got, I've spent, I don't know, $200 buying NFTs. They're all going to die, and that's really refreshing because there will be functionality in there. So dying is an emotive term that I'm using. But obviously they're not dying; they're still NFTs that can't be used in one mode, but maybe will be used in another mode. But his whole point, the whole point of Blocklords, is that over the next kind of couple of years is you will create a dynasty. So obviously you have certain power at the time. You have whatever your resources are in the game, certain NFTs that you have, certain golden blockchain tokens and stuff. But the whole point is it's like like being a king. When you're a king, you got a castle and armies and stuff, but tomorrow you might have a battle and lose it, half your kingdom and your and this is what he wants it to be in the game, that there'll be sort of a lifespan of each character. They'll die. You can take your heroes and marry them and have children. Not quite sure how much they've thought through how that's going to work. But a strategy game that starts off about resources and farming, and then they have a whole battle mode coming in. That's the next sort of big mode coming in that's not there at the moment. But the long-term thing is everything in the game will sort of pass, but you'll have this heritage, this lineage, and it'll have DNA characteristics. So he spoke about CryptoKitties, where we used to play that back in whenever 7 years ago, where we used to try and breed. You'd have all this DNA and you try and breed to get these certain characteristics, and he'll say, people will be trying to do that as well. So in some ways, it was sort of fascinating in terms of the nuts and bolts of how you run a successful blockchain games company now, and the pressures that you're under from your investors maybe, and all this sort of stuff, and the pressures you're under from your token going live, and but equally this strong vision of you don't just spend $1,000 on an NFT and then hope its price is going to go up. If you're spending $1,000 on an NFT in Blocklords, probably be a pretty powerful NFT for battling. You'll probably do really well in the battles, but at some point it's going to become a fallen hero. You're not going to have it anymore. That was the inspiring bit, I felt.
Good. I love it. And it certainly made you more enthusiastic about the game again, which you've sort of had a bit of a torn relationship this year. But now you're back fully enthusiastic playing it.
Yeah.
Right. So that was a good run through. Thank you very much for listening, and we will see you all next week again. You find all of our content, obviously, that interview on our website, blockchaingaming.biz. You find the podcast on your normal podcast providers, and you find John's daily newsletter on Games TX. All right, thank you very much. Bye.